What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today I have spent far too much time this morning when I really had things I needed to do, figuring out how to play the Transformers deck building game, so I figured I should come and share what I found out with you lovely ladies and gentlemen. Now, I am well aware that yesterday, literally yesterday, I showed you this game and I told you that we didn't know how it plays and blah blah blah, we didn't have that kind of information. Well, unfortunately, very shortly after I made that video, they went and dropped the rulebook, which kind of means we do know everything we need to know now. So let's go and take a look at everything we need to know about how it plays, and I, for one, am rather excited indeed. Now, the game can be played either competitively or cooperatively / solo, and your win conditions are different depending on where you are. If you are playing a cooperative or solo game, your aim is to defeat 3 bosses, and then you win. If you're playing competitively, it is whoever has the most victory points at the end of the game. Similarly, how the game ends will be different. The game ends all the time if you defeat 3 Decepticon bosses, or if you need to add a card to your matrix, that's your playing area, and you're unable to do so. And in cooperative and solo, if one player takes 5 damage, then the game will end there and then. Now, the basics here, you start with a 10-card deck. You buy more cards when they are uncovered from the matrix to try and improve your deck as you go along. And the matrix is a grid of cards that you use to move about on, and you uncover those cards to start battles, buy cards to improve your deck, etc. Now, if we take a little bit of a look at a character card and what a character card actually looks like here, I am just going to steal the example from the rulebook. I will pop a link to the rulebook in the description so you can go and check that one out. But we've got here Wheeljack, and we can see there that you've got the name of Wheeljack, you've got your alt and your bot mode. They're always just referred to as alt modes. We've got game text ability when in bot mode. Wheeljack gives all of your technology +1 power. It gives you your 2 Energon abilities. These are abilities that you can activate by spending your Energon cubes. And if you spend 1, your technology cards have +2 range for the turn. And if you spend 2, then you gain 1 technology card from the main deck destroyed pile, which sounds kind of fun. Over on the alt mode, you'll notice that there is a move score. That is how many moves you can have, how many spaces you can move when you're in alt mode. You'll notice bot mode has no move power. That is deliberate. And you've then got an alt mode skill there as well. After you resolve an ambush, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a technology, you draw it. Otherwise, you leave it or discard it, which I love because it means you can plan for the future. And when you are battling adversaries, -1 power. So try and get in bot mode before you fight him, would ya? Taking a look at a main deck card, we can take a look at Jazz here just as an example. And we've got 3 basic values there. You have got the power value of the card. That is extremely important. You've got the range of the card. We'll get to that in a moment. And the move value, you gain move values as you play cards, which essentially adds to the moves that you can do as you go through your turn. You've also got in the top left there a cost of 4, which essentially means you need to generate 4 power in order to buy Jazz and add it to your deck. You'll notice there is a block skill there. You draw 1 card and gain 1 Energon. So if you use Jazz to block, more on that in a moment, you will activate those skills. You can also pay 1 Energon to gain +2 power if you're on a site. And if you successfully battle a card and defeat it, you gain 2 victory points. Obviously, Jazz is an Autobot. You're not going to be battling Jazz often, but there are mechanisms in the game to allow you to do so. Now, in order to start the game, you need to set up the matrix. This is a grid you use to move around on. This is where you find the cards to battle and add to your deck, etc. Now, it is important to note that relics are only used for competitive games, and your main deck is made up of Ally, Maneuver, Decepticon Scheme, Sight, Technology, and robot cards. Robots can be Autobots or Decepticons. And what you do is you play cards from the main deck randomly to make a matrix, which is a different size depending on how many players you've got. And then you make 3 more stacks of cards, which again depends on how many players you've got, values are on the screen, and a 4th stack with 5 cards. Now, I've mentioned there are 3 bosses. What you essentially do is take one random boss of each power and put it into the stacks. So you'll put one level 1 boss into stack 1, a level 2 boss into stack 2, and a level 3 boss into stack 3. You then stack your stacks in order, do not randomize them, and this makes the main deck. I.e., you're going to hit the level 1 boss first, then the level 2 boss, then the level 3 boss. That kind of makes perfect sense to me. And then you got that 4th stack of 5 cards, which will essentially prevent the game from ending too quickly after that 3rd boss is revealed. Now, when you start the game, you have to pick an Autobot. Look, I'm not you. Pick it however you want. Draft it. It's up to you. Decide that with your players. You then have a starting deck which will always be 6 courage, 1 firepower, 1 patrol, 1 fix, and 1 reserves. Your deck starts generic. It's a deck building game. You will add to this as we go through. You have a starting hand of 5 cards drawn from that deck, and everybody starts with 2 Energon cubes. Now, there are a bunch of different types of cards in the game, and unfortunately, we do need to understand all of these as we go through. Now, ally cards are humans and equipment. They generally have ongoing or start of turn effects, so they stay in play and help you for a while, although apparently bosses can scare them off for a little while. Basic cards, you've got Transform and Roll Out, which is a 2-cost card that can always be bought no matter where you are in the matrix. It's a generic kind of card that gives you 1 of each stat there, and allows you to transform without spending an Energon cube, so you can imagine wanting a couple of those. Damage, however, is a 0-cost card, but this is something you get during the game. It is a bad thing. They can be destroyed, because when you battle an adversary, you must resolve 1 assist if you're damaged. It can be bad in competitive games, we'll get there in a moment. And at the end of the game, for every 2 damage you control, you lose 1 victory point. Again, this is a bad thing in competitive games. Like I've said, in a solo or co-op, taking 5 damage will lose you the game. In competitive, these are actually super annoying cards that you do not want to have, but they won't end the game if you get too many of them. It will just put you at a massive disadvantage. Now, cooperative schemes are essentially hurdles to be faced in co-op. They can be thwarted and removed, but you gain no rewards for doing so. They're just kind of annoying and you want rid of them. Decepticon bosses are seeded into the main deck. Like we said, there will be 3 of them. They have reveal attacks when they are revealed, and they have ongoing and start of turn effects until they are defeated. But when they are defeated, you gain victory points, and you put them into your vault. And obviously cards in your vault will gain you victory points, which are very important at the end of a competitive game. Now, a Decepticon scheme is one that you would thwart to put into your vault, and then they will earn you victory points, which, as said, good in competitive games. Encounter cards actually go in their own stack, and they are drawn when you are ambushed or when you confront an adversary. So if we take a look at Uphill Battle here, an attack as an ambush will lose you 1 victory point, and the boss reveal, ambush hits all adversaries. As a boss confrontation, you add 1 to the adversary's cost, which remember is how much you need to actually have to defeat them, for each victory point you have, but if you've got none, you gain 2 damage. So if you're sitting there with 5 victory points, you're feeling good about yourself, and then this comes out and all of a sudden it takes 5 more to actually defeat the boss, that is a bad thing, ladies and gentlemen. So lots of risk reward that makes me very happy in these kind of card games. Maneuvers are combat abilities and effects that you learn by buying the card. Relics are expensive, they are powerful, and they get you 3 victory points at the end of the game if they're in your vault. But as soon as you defeat the 3rd boss, the game will end, and it's too late to at that point go and put them in your vault. You have been warned. But we've got something like Matrix of Leadership, which is an 8-cost card, which is obviously very expensive. But it lets you gain 1 robot from the Matrix, or 2 Energon if there aren't any in there. If you would get to put this card in your discard pile, you may put it in your vault instead, and like I've said, at the end of the game, free victory points. That can be huge. Now, robots are either adversaries to be defeated to gain victory points and other rewards, or they are not adversaries that you can buy and put in your discard pile like I showed you earlier. A site cannot be bought, it sits in the Matrix and you essentially take advantage of it. So Desert, if you're willing to pay free power, you gain the top card of the main deck. If it's an adversary, destroy the site, place the adversary in the space instead, and resolve an ambush. You don't want to pay free power to start an ambush generally, but otherwise you get a free card, and that's a good thing. Like I've said, risk reward, it makes card games fun. Your starting cards are your generic cards in your starting deck. You use them to buy better cards. And technology are equipment and utility cards that don't grant move. So I keep talking about ambush then. What exactly is an ambush? Well, this is where you essentially look at a particular card and it turns out to be an adversary, which generally you're not really going to want it to be. If it's an ambush, all the Autobots in the space are ambushed, but if you move to face them, if they're already face up and you move over there, only the Autobot that moves over is ambushed, even if there is another Autobot on that part of the Matrix. You reveal 1 encounter card, you read the encounter text. When you confront a boss, all the encounter cards are shuffled, even the discard pile. You reveal 1, you resolve the confrontation text, and only the active player is actually affected. So that's essentially what we do in terms of ambushing and confronting the boss. We'll get to resolving battles in a moment. Now, in terms of the turn sequence, you can do whatever you want as long as you've got the cards to do so. You can play a card from your hand to generate power and move and resolve certain abilities. You can spend 1 move to move your Autobot to an adjacent space, not diagonally. You can search your current space by spending a move. That's where you turn the card face up and it could be a site or an adversary or something you can buy. You buy or battle cards within range of your Autobot. You activate Energon abilities by spending your cubes. You transform by spending an Energon to flip your character. Or you confront a Decepticon boss, although that is limited to once during your turn. At the end of your turn, you lose all your remaining power and move. If you haven't spent them, you lose them. You then refill the Matrix. Now, this is kind of complicated. If there is an empty space, you just put a face-down card in the space, you're fine. If there are no empty spaces, you reveal the top card of your main deck. If it's not a boss, you destroy it. So far, so good. But if it is a boss, then the active player has to destroy a card from the Matrix that is not a visible scheme or adversary, and that's where the boss goes. But if it is, and you have to flip it up to check, if it is an adversary or scheme, then you have to destroy a different card. Again, if you look at another and it's an adversary or scheme, you keep going. And then you finally put the boss down when you find a space that's not an adversary or a scheme. However, if you have revealed an adversary, it will ambush any Autobots that are in that space, which is a little bit sad. If 3 Decepticon bosses have been defeated, or the main deck is empty and the Matrix needs refilling, the game ends. If the main deck is empty but the Matrix does not need refilling, you carry on. You then discard all the cards in your hand and all the cards you played, unless they have that ongoing keyword. Relics go to the vault, and you draw a new hand of 5 cards. Now, in terms of basic actions, there are 3 that can be performed on your turn. You can transform to cost 1 Energon, you flip your character. You can move, spending 1 move, which moves you 1 space up, down, left or right. And you can search by flipping up the card you're standing on, which again costs 1 move. And I know it sounds sad to flip and you might get an adversary, but remember, you've got to find and defeat the 3 bosses to win the game, so yeah. You're going to need to find them eventually, ladies and gentlemen. Now, in terms of playing cards, when you play a card, you gain the power and move as is stated on the card. Energon abilities can be used whenever, unless they have confront or assist, in which case they can only be used during a confrontation or when you're assisting another player. And any game text is resolved immediately. So transform and roll out, you have to transform when you play it. You can't play it and transform 5 minutes down the line. In terms of spending your move, remember this is generated by playing cards and you might have move on your well, you should. Flight will let you move diagonally, otherwise it's one space, not diagonally, and flight only affects the card it's printed on, not your other cards. When you search, you spend a move to flip your matrix card, as we've mentioned. However, some cards will let you search adjacent squares. You have been warned. Now, in terms of spending your power, you add this up as you play cards. You use it to buy non-adversary cards. Like we've said, they can be pretty good. You use it to battle adversary cards. And you reduce by cost as you buy and battle. I.e., you've got to have 4 power to buy or battle and defeat a 4 power or 4 cost card. Now, using range allows you to buy and battle cards from other spaces, but it only affects that card. So if you've got a card with 2 power and 1 range, that means you can battle a 2 power card or buy a 2 power card 1 space away. But if you want to buy or battle a 3 power card, not only do you need 1 more power, but you need 1 more power on a card that has 1 range. You can't have a 2 power 1 range card and a 1 power 0 range card. That won't work. In terms of Energon, you start the game with 2. You gain it as you go. It's represented by little cubes. And it is important to note that in co-op, obviously victory points mean nothing. So what you do is you convert victory points to Energon. Transforming costs 1 Energon, and Energon abilities will cost either 1 or 2 Energon. So as we saw earlier with Wheeljack, your 1 Energon skill gives +2 range to each of your technology cards, and your 2 Energon skill lets you gain 1 technology card from the main deck destroyed pile. Which sounds kind of good, honestly. Now, in terms of dealing with your adversaries, firstly, you must reveal, like we said, encounter cards, but only for the right kind of encounter, ambush or boss confrontation. When you reveal an adversary, there is an ambush, and it ambushes all Autobots in the space. If you move there, only the one that moves is ambushed. A boss will reveal its attack, as in do its reveal attack against everyone, and then ambush against each adversary player. Confrontation, you must confront a boss in order to battle it, although there are some schemes that apparently make you confront regular Decepticons. You cannot play cards after you announce a confrontation, but you are still able to block, because that is discarding a card from your hand. It's not really playing a card. Now, in terms of blocking, you can avoid an attack by blocking, but it only protects 1 player, and it is 1 block per player per attack. And as with all the other cards, there is range, and range is important. So if you play Jazz, you can block an attack while drawing a card and gaining an Energon, which seems like a really good block skill, but obviously we'll have to compare it to the other cards as we see. Now, when you're battling adversaries, it's just like buying cards. You spend enough power to beat the number in the top left-hand corner, but defeated adversaries do not go into the deck. You gain the rewards at the bottom of the card and then put them into the vault. But players can assist you, and if they assist you, you get the same rewards as they do. Although you get the card in the vault, they don't. So in terms of the battle order, you move into range. You play cards to generate the power that is printed on them. And then you resolve any ambushes, and you resolve any non-confront abilities. Confront abilities, remember, is only during a confrontation. Now, if we take a quick time out here to take a little bit of a look at assisting, you want to assist in order to gain rewards, because the most victory points win in a competitive game. So in a competitive game, you don't really want your opponent to assist you because that gives them bonuses. So you only have to accept an assist if it is either a confrontation and you don't have enough power, or you have damage on you. If you have damage, you must accept a number of assists equal to the number of damage cards you control, even if you end up with too much power and you end up overkilling the bot you're fighting against. It's basically a punishment for having damage cards. In a confrontation, you only have to accept assists until you've got enough power, at which point you can tell the other players to go away. They essentially bid in order to be assisting, and you can choose or not. Although in order to assist, they must generate at least 1 power, and they must be in range. But this can be secretive, or you can sell it. So your opponent can be like, mate, I've got a free power card, you want me assisting? Or they can just be a little bit coy about it. You can activate Energon abilities on assist cards, though you don't have to, and even if there is a move value on an assist card, move is not generated. In terms of cooperative, you want people to assist, because it's all about running around and beating the boss, and you can have assists whenever you feel like it. And remember that when you assist, you get victory points, but in cooperative, victory points turn into Energon, and you want your friends to have Energon, so in a cooperative game, assisting as much as possible. In a competitive game, only when you have to. Now, if you are able to defeat the adversary, you gain rewards and the card goes into your vault. Anyone who assisted gains the same rewards as you do, but they don't get the card in their vault. If it is not defeated, it stays in play and nobody gets anything. You then discard all cards that don't have the ongoing keyword. You lose any unused power and move. You discard any assist cards even if they are unresolved. And you are then allowed to play any remaining cards in your hand, unless it was a confrontation, which immediately ends your turn. Now, when we get to the end of the game, you then need to figure out the end game scoring. So if we take a little bit of a look at the end game scoring, there are a bunch of different ways you can actually go ahead and score. Remember, this is only for a competitive game. In a co-op game, it's not relevant. You add up all the costs of all robots and bosses in your vault, and you get 1 victory point for every 5. So for instance, 11 would give you 2 victory points. You gain 1 victory point for every 5 Energon you still have, rounded down. 19 Energon gets you 3 victory points. You just add up the victory points from your relics and schemes. You remove 1 victory point for every 2 damage. Again, rounded down, so 3 damage, you only lose 1 victory point. And then you see who wins. In terms of tiebreakers, most bosses, most Energon, and if there still isn't a tiebreaker, you can, I don't know, decide it yourself, or just accept the tie. And finally, a few extra rules just for if you are going co-op or solo. You don't do any scorekeeping. Victory points just get converted into Energon. You cannot defeat the boss if there are any non-boss adversaries in the Matrix. Obviously, in competitive, if you're ahead, it is absolutely in your interest to rush and finish off the final boss, so the game ends and you win. Anyone can assist in battles, and like we said, you'll want to. You lose when one player takes 5 damage cards. There are ways to get rid of them. You win when 3 bosses are defeated. And if you want an expert mode, the rulebook does suggest not converting victory points into Energon to really make it more difficult. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Not the most straightforward game ever, but oh my goodness, it sounds like an awful lot of fun. And I spent an awful lot of time poring over the rulebook, cutting it down and making a lovely video. So in theory now, if you want to read the rulebook, brilliant. It's in the description. Go follow that link. If you don't want to read it, now you shouldn't have to. At least not to get started. But now I want to hear from you guys. I want to know how excited you are for this game. I want to know which Transformers you want added to future versions of the game and expansions and all of that. I want to know whatever you want to tell me. So go nuts, but be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi. That's where we talk Transformers and a whole bunch of other card games. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCGradio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all kinds of fun things. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wasi Plays.